and thanks for stopping by. This is Speak and Roadshow, and I am your host, Rich Levesque. And in this episode, it's going to be one of what we're going to call in the future a coffee house chat. One of those where we just kind of talk about a subject, and occasionally I'm going to just take it and wing it. Other times I'm going to put a question or a topic out to readers and fans and other followers on social media and bounce off of what people have to say about it. And this is going to be one of those. I put out on my pages a few days ago this following question about home. Now let me ask you this. What is it that makes home, well, home? Does the word home even resonate? I feel like this is a question that can go all kinds of different ways. There's the, classic feeling of, the four walls and the white picket fence and the, where your family is and all that. But it can also mean so many different things to different people. Home can be who, home can be where, home can be within or without. Home can be so many things. And, for myself, being kind of a nomadic being, like for me to be told I had to stay in one place for like this really, really long period of time and know that I would be unable to go anywhere else would make me absolutely crazy. I've always had a nomadic streak to me, and home tends to, vary, and home for me has a shelf life. And after a certain amount of time, that pull, comes to me. It's like, okay, it's time for something else. It's time to have a new experience. It's time to see a new place or have a new story. And it's been something that I've been spinning around about. And I was asked about the first time I felt like I was home. And for me was, I would say, college. And even then, it probably, I would say it probably ended at right around the right time. Because by the time I was moving on, I was ready. I was better for the experience, and there was a lot that I was saying goodbye to, and that really sucked. But it also felt like that chapter played itself out as it needed to, and it was time for a new one. And I've kind of felt that way, even if I didn't necessarily feel like I was at home, quote unquote. I've always, after a certain amount of time, felt like it was time for something else. And I think I'm always going to have that within me to some degree. And, I was trying to figure out what that was kind of like. And of course, you think of like the old classic movies where you have like the loner drifter that would come waltzing into town and, kind of turn everything on its ear and whatnot. And, I don't know if it was ever really like that for me. It was more like, all right, some of you youngins are going to have no freaking clue who I'm talking about, but you know what? Go Google it. There was a show, and I want to say the late 70s. And it was called, I think it was Here's Boomer. And it was, scrappy little dog. At the time, Benji was big, so it was essentially a knockoff of Benji. And his basic premise was he would just kind of show up in town and, he would, help a family or a person, and it would be like this heartwarming story. But, once the plot resolved itself in that episode, it was time for him to move on. And that's kind of what it feels like to me. Kind of feels like Boomer. And no, I am not going to accept people responding to me, okay, Boomer. No. So I was, inspired by that conversation I was having about school. And, I'm probably about 2.5 hours away. And I took a ride up there on a whim last week. And it's always nice to go and see that end of the world. And, it's, let me just read off what I was thinking. I posted it in my website, so I'll just kind of tear through it really quick. And all right, I've gone through that. So I went up there, I'd revisited it, and it was, not really where I needed to be in the traditional sense. I was in no way prepared for college or any sort of academic work in any way. I had natural smarts, but I was also naive and sheltered and really had no plan or discipline and no real interest in developing any. It really wasn't what I wanted. Kind of a bad combination when you're in a place where there's lots of distractions and traps for people with no plans and no discipline. And, the right answer at that point probably would have been, let's revisit the whole college thing once I have a plan. But no one was hearing that either. It did offer an escape from being in the middle of an increasingly nasty divorce. So, there was that. Ended up being the only real acceptable means to get out of town for a few years. It ended up being a quite expensive means, but still. In the process, I kind of managed to morph from a significantly less wealthy Carlton Banks and that whole naive way, and I kind of evolved into a much less funny Bluto from Animal House. So, yeah, academically it was a shit show. But while I seemed to get absolutely nothing in the classroom, I also had the time of my life. The crews that I ran with did, change over the years, but there was a constant throughout. It felt like home. It was the place where I could be myself, however that evolved. And it did evolve over time. I learned how to get back up after falling on my ass. It was where I learned that from sunup to sundown, I truly did matter. I mean, in reality, I guess it was more like mid-afternoon to sunrise, but, semantics. So I'm there waltzing around, and a lot of these memories were coming back to me. I wasn't getting much done anyway, so I ended up taking that ride. And I'm driving around, and, there's a lot of faces and names and stories and experiences flying through. Were they all great memories? Of course not. There were certainly some hard lessons in there as well. But 90% of them were pretty wonderful. And there were, epic road trips and parties and other shenanigans. But it was always the little small moments and the simple things that really mattered the most. Little goofy things that would happen at work, or the time we would be eating dinner in the dining hall, and somebody would do or say something really goofy, and we would just not be able to stop laughing for 20 minutes. Like, those are the memories that come back the most, And, a lot of laughter. Love and lessons and all that stuff, but also laughter. Some fear, some heartbreak, some dark nights with lots of tears. A whole lot of bad decisions. But overall, love and laughter and belonging. It was a place where I wasn't just somewhat tolerated, but wanted, heard, and understood. It was the first time I would vanish and people would come looking for me. As I walked through the different areas, there was a lot of change. It's been 25 years. You'd expect that. There's buildings where there didn't used to be. There were roundabouts where they didn't used to be. Everything evolves, of course, and, that's a good thing. And, over a course of a long period of time, things should be different. If they're not, something's probably wrong. Now, I went back to where my old dorms were, and this was the one area of campus that looked exactly the same as it did when I was there. Went back, took a look outside from, counted up to the 13th floor and looked over to the right, and I could find my old room, and a lot of different memories were flowing through at that point. The nights we, stayed up drinking and bullshitting until the sun came up, and, the crazy conversations with different people we'd have in the lounge downstairs. The time we found the stray group of kittens outside of the dining hall. So many random experiences kind of flying through. And then I'm kind of, my mind's kind of pondering as I'm just kind of bopping around. It's been about, it wasn't 25, might be closer to like 23 years that I left that room for good. So, how many kids have gone through that same room since then? How many different hopes and dreams came and went? How many memories created? How many epic moments happened, and how many different journeys crossed through that same small space over the years? You figure maybe 50 or 60 different kids that would have gone through that same space and absolutely, while we crossed paths, it was all in different timelines, and none of us ever crossed, as far as I know. And I was just kind of blown away by that. How many entirely different stories and timelines passing through that same space, and how many are going to, how many did so before I got there, and how many will before, days and years after. It could end up being hundreds. I'm not going to do the math. But all of these different, unrelated journeys coming across this one little corner at different times. And what else kind of hit me was, the place was just a container. It's just bricks and concrete. It could have been anywhere. It was what came with the container in the time that I was there that made it everything. It was the faces, the names, the people, the experiences, the connections, the adventures. The where ultimately was irrelevant. It was who. It was always about the who. And of course, as tends to happen, the who had long scattered, and everybody's following their own unique journeys. All of us through our own lives. There are some that I still connect with on occasion, but the bulk of them have disappeared off into the sunset. Of course, I wonder what their stories looked like over the years. What their career paths became. What about their families? What part of the world did they settle in? I've got these ideas sometimes in my head about how it might likely have played out, but I'm pretty sure they're completely wrong. But your mind wanders and you can kind of have fun with these things. And of course, there's that selfish part of me that wonders how many still may remember me, and how much the same memories I had might be playing back in their minds. And they were what made it home, not what presently exists. Maybe it always was about the who and not the what when it came to defining what home is. Or maybe I just have one of many possible ways to define it. Like, everything else ever. Maybe that's just how my existence is meant to be. That home is only for a short shelf life, and that it's time to move on. Home may always have a fluid meaning in my life, and this was simply part of that. But it was nice to play in the memories for a little while. Felt pretty good. And it makes total sense that it would feel good, It is fun to go back, but the general feeling for me was, if I were to go back and make it home again, it wouldn't possibly be the same scenario. I mean, of course, I'm sure I could build something up and build my own circles like I've done anywhere else. But it wouldn't be home as I knew it back then. And it would be really no different than if I landed in New York or Arizona or somewhere in South America. It would have been the same difference at this point. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. So, going from there, I'm going to talk about what some of you had to say about the subject. I'm going to bounce around between, the responses I got from Facebook and what I got off of Instagram, and kind of riff off of those for a little bit. And as I was kind of alluding to in the intro, it really does mean a lot of things, and it goes in a lot of different directions for people. And it is like everything else, and it's unique to what our own experiences are. So I'm going to start with Stephanie says, home is between the covers of a good book. And I know for a lot of people, a lot of avid readers, that's true. If you're jumping into a book and you're locked in, and it's just fun being in that sense of seeing the adventure from the picture that the author is creating for you. And you could say that, it's really, it doesn't matter what kind of books you're into, you can still have that experience. If you're, whether you're into, fantasy novels or sci-fi or romances, or even, if you're into biographies or And even stuff like, nonfiction, going into things like, I like reading a lot of, psychology, it's, self-help, those, kind of genres. And, if I'm kind of looking through it, I'm reading about a concept, I can take that and I can either create a scenario where I'm watching it play out, or I can go back into a past story where, in a past story where I can, look at it differently through a different theory or a different idea or a different construct. And, it's fascinating to me. Juliana says it's a soul's recognition in a place or person, and just intuitively your soul knows. Your mind may not. And there's definitely something to that. You kind of get that inner sense, that inner feeling that a place is where you belong. You just know. You can't put it in a tangible term to explain it to somebody else sometimes, but you just know. Shirley adds, wherever people are not. And for some, some of us are not people persons to a degree, and if you're very introverted, even if you're an outgoing introvert, yes, they exist. You're gonna go for a night, or you're gonna go for a couple of days, and you're gonna go like the Energizer Bunny, and then it's gonna be done, and you're just gonna be toast, and you need to be away from humanity, and you just need to shut it down, and you need to decompress, and you just, and for other people, they don't even want any part of those situations. They just, they're perfectly content doing their own thing at their own pace and not have to worry about other people unless they absolutely have to, unless they're like their people, like their immediate family or their kids or their partners, and maybe a couple of other people, and they're perfectly happy with that. That's a big part of being home, is having that right comfort in who's around and sometimes who's not around. Gonna shift over to the gram. Anna says home is where the ones I love are. And Hinata adds my best friend. Yeah, sometimes it really comes down to who's there. And it may be that just being with our favorite people is what makes it home, and the rest of it is just irrelevant. And the place could be completely irrelevant, as Danita writes. Home is heaven, a place that is not a place at all. I am at home when I am in my isness. No one, no thing, no time. And, that's, it's about, what's present, where you are in your presence. Very, it can be just as much of a spiritual space and place if that's where, if that's what calls to you. And I'll go to Steph. For me, home is wherever the people I love are found. I have several homes in the world. There are places I enjoy being, cities and countries, locations. I always feel at home with my friends and family. And there are many facets to who I am. Home is a place, situation, relationship where I can easily and freely be one or more parts of myself. And sometimes when I'm alone in the car and singing at the top of my lungs, I swear I could have written this. And, there's points for me where, home to me is, on a random interstate, God knows where, just me and a few trucks, my Spotify playlist, and the open road. That's where many of my best ideas come from. And a lot of times it's where if I get messages from the beyond, that's where they come to me. And, those are stories probably for another show. Todd mentions my breath. When that is my focus, my mind slows and I am present. That feeling, that is home to me. And if you're familiar with breath work or with different degrees of meditation, and I don't have much experience with yoga myself, but I know people that have and have had similar experiences as well. If these are tools that can kind of get you like right into the present, into what's right now, what's within you in the moment. And ultimately that present is really all that we can control. And yet, so much of the time, we're either rehashing the past, which is ironic considering what half of this show's been about, but a lot of times we kind of we're either in our past, which has already happened, and for good or for bad, we really can't do much with it other than reframe things if necessary. But again, that's a whole other Pandora's box for another day. And when we go into the future, we're not there yet. We can't possibly know all the information and all the elements that are going to be at play. I mean, how many times have our lives taken these sharp turns and had all these crazy unexpected things come about that we never could have possibly seen coming. And yet, so much of our worry is what'll happen in the future. How can we protect ourselves from A, B, or C going wrong in the future? Or what can I do to maximize what my future is going to look like? And ultimately, we never truly know until we're there. And Susie writes, home is an emotionally comfortable and safe and pleasurable space created by those who live in the space. A space adorned sparsely or chaotically or somewhere in between, with personal mementos and desires which provide both function and a pleasure to entertain or caress the mind. A space where others may enter by invitation and absorb themselves in a sensory delight of feel, sight, smell, and taste. This space is so safe we can sleep and bathe in comfort. We own the choices and decisions within this space without judgment from within. Home is like a huge treasure chest which requires enormous effort to relocate and settle once again into home. And that's I like that description. And it talks about the physical space, but it's also can be what the space is made to represent. And there's multiple levels of that. There's, the physical and how you make it work functionally and what kind of vibe or energy you get from it. And is it, a place where you go to hide? Do you keep it as a sanctuary? Or is it a place where people kind of, come in and out and maybe it's your sanctuary in that way? I like that word sanctuary. I think that really flows with a lot of Susie's message here. And, there really is an awful lot to that. And my last message is going to be from Terry, going right into sanctuary. It is my sanctuary for me to be me without judgment or violence. And that alludes to, at least the way I perceive it, it alludes to safety as well. And the next one of these we do is going to evolve around safety. And in particular, when we go into safety mode because we feel like we're not being seen and we're not feeling understood or acknowledged, and what that all means. So we'll have that coming up soon, and we're going to have a couple more Beacon Road shows in the next week with some guests, and just keep coming back to this space because as the mission keeps building, we're going to keep growing, and I'd love to have you along for the journey with us. Check out my website, beaconroad.net. If you're pulled to check out my Patreon, it's Patreon/Beacon Road. And, on the usual social media suspects. Facebook and Twitter are at Beacon Road, the number 10. So Beacon Road 10. And then Instagram is at Beacon Road. So thank you very much for coming and hanging out. We have all these different commodities that we collect, we use, we recollect. There's money, there's goods and stuff, but the most finite one we're going to have, the one that's actually got the limit to it, is time. And gratefully spent some of that, listening here. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you back here soon. Be safe, be well, take care.